Shalom and welcome to the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. Looking today at Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 18. We've seen in the oracle that started in verse 16, we've seen the Lord developing an argument to his people that I've been calling you to go back to the ancient paths and find rest for your soul, and you were not willing to walk in those paths. I've been calling you to listen to the watchmen. I've given you watchmen and told you to listen, and you're not willing to listen to them. And so today we're going to start out with this word lakein, therefore, which is going to have some of the consequences of it. So it looks like a fairly easy word. We got a couple of little tricky things we're going to have to deal with, but let's go ahead and read it in Hebrew as we get started. Lakein shim'u hagoyim udei eda et asher bam. So lakein, for thus, in other words, therefore, Shim'u, therefore, listen. So here we have an imperative, IMPV, with the U formative. It's going to be a 2MP, cal, from our verb shema, to hear, to listen. So listen, and who's going to do the listening? Ha-goyim. The goy usually referring to pagan nations, so this would be the nations. And the article here probably has almost a vocative sense. Listen, O nations. So the Lord is calling the nations to be a witness to what is about to happen to his people. And, just a conjunction, da'i. Now this also, a little bit tricky here. This also is an imperative, but you have this e formative at the end instead of an u, so this is going to be a 2fs, second feminine singular, cal, from our verb yada, which takes its imperative form by dropping the od at the beginning of it. So now the question is, who is the subject of this 2fs? Well, it's obviously this feminine word here, eda, but the problem is we know two different words that are written the same way, eda. One of them comes from the root ya'ad, which means to appoint. And so there's a word eda, which comes from this verbal idea of appointing, and it means congregation, assembly, something along that line, community that has been appointed. There's another root as well from the verb ud, with a shurik in the middle, which means to bear testimony or to be a witness. And there's also a word eda, spelled the same way. So it could be from this word, and it would mean congregation. It could be from this word, and it could mean witness, perhaps in a collective sense, as a group of witnesses. Now, to whom is this referring? Therefore, hear, O nations, and know, O congregation, or know, O witness. Is this another term for the nations? Is this in apposition to the nations? Are they being called to be the congregation that is going to witness the rest of it? So it's a little bit tricky to know how best to translate this here. And what is it they're going to witness? Or what is it the congregation is supposed to know? They're supposed to know, O congregation, or know, O witness. Here's your direct object marker. This is what they're going to know, which we would have to translate that as with a relative pronoun here as that which in them, or that which with them. And this has been tricky for commentators and translators to try and figure out what do we do with this? Is this referring to that which is in them? In other words, my evil people, their stubborn hearts. I'm calling the pagan nations to know, O witness, of that which is in them, to see how recalcitrant and how stubborn they've been. That's might be the best way to take that. There's Septuagint tries to work with this, and some other translations try and smooth it out in some different ways, as you'll see. So it looks fairly easy, but you're going to have to do some work on the commentators, and you'll see a little bit of variation here. So big question about this noun here. Which of these two roots does it come from? Ultimately, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference because the overall context is very clear. So let's hide our work and look at a couple of translations. New American Standard kind of retains the ambiguity of the text as it is in the Hebrew. Therefore, hear, O nations, and know, O congregations. They've taken it from the Ya'ad root. what is among them, that which is among them. We're not sure among whom, presumably among God's people, and what is among them is presumably their sin in that context there. New Jerusalem Bible, then hear, you nations, and know, assembly, so they're taking it like congregation as well, what is going to happen to them, that which is with them instead of among them. Maybe not the sin that's that God has underlined through the previous verses in Jeremiah, but maybe that which God has said he's going to do with them, what is going to happen to them. That's a possible translation as well. NIV is going to take this word in a different way. Therefore, hear, you nations, you who are witnesses. So they're taking it from this other verbal root, ud, which means to bear testimony or witness. And you who are witnesses, observe, know, right here, what will happen to them. So they're taking this latter part, what is going to happen to them, sort of like the New Jerusalem Bible did. And you'll see these sort of variations among the different translations as you look through, and you can pick this up in the commentaries as well. The overall idea is very clear. God is to the point now, because the people won't listen, God is calling in outside observers like the other nations. We're going to see the earth itself in the following verse, verse 19, as being called to bear witness to what God is the way he's dealing with his people, whether it's what he's observed or what he's about to do, one way or the other. God is totally in control. He is absolutely just. And when he brings his correction to his people, it's because he knows that they deserve it and they need it for their good and for his glory. So hard verse here to translate with precision, but it does reveal that God knows what he's doing with his people. And that's our trust, that's our confidence. We'll check back with us soon as we continue working through Jeremiah chapter 6 in the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. Shalom.